Hello, I'm Mary Reese from NJPSA and FEA, and today is the second day of our annual fall conference, NJPSA, FEA, and NJASCD. And I cannot tell you how thrilled I am that our keynote speaker is Dr. Sean Ginwright from Harvard University, and also from Flourish Agenda. In New Jersey, for the past 3 years, we have engaged in an amazing project around healing-centered engagement to look at adverse and positive childhood experiences, trauma-informed practices, and to change the mindset of educators, school personnel, and community partners in the way they look at their work. So we're here today with Dr. Ginwright, and what I really want to know is, given that we're doing all this work in New Jersey, what does it look like? What should we see when we walk into a classroom, when we walk into a building, when we have conversations? Tell us about it.
Yeah, well, I want to give you a real vivid picture of not what it should look like, but what it has looked like in other cities. Sure. I want to start with New York City in the Bronx, where a group of teachers, a group of the school administrators decided to use healing-centered engagement to saturate the Bronx with, I think it was about 80 schools in healing-centered engagement. So they trained teachers on healing-centered practices, but they didn't stop there. They also took that training and modified it to train parents, and of course they trained young people. And it was precisely what we call the ecosystem approach, where we know that it's important to work with teachers, but it's also important that young people have those tools, and it's also important that parents have those tools. So in the Bronx, they created an entire movement around healing-centered engagement. So what does it look like? It looked like every school was charged with developing their own healing-centered engagement project. It looked like every school having its own healing fair, its own healing day, where young people are talking in circles about not only about their trauma, but about their joy. It looked like taking healing-centered engagement conversations and translating it into Spanish and other language, where parents are talking about not only their challenges with raising children in their communities, but also the hopes and dreams of for their own children. It looks like walking into a school and seeing every teacher before they start their lesson for the day to do a 10 to 15 minute social emotional check-in. It looks like teachers in their staff meetings before they jump into the agenda is themselves doing their own social emotional check-in, so that everybody has a space to sort of put what's happening with them on the table, and everybody actually is then building their own sort of environment around healing-centered engagement. That's New York. In Philadelphia, Philadelphia has similar issues to a lot of cities in this country where there's high violence, a lot of young people exposed to trauma, and not the bandwidth to actually respond to it. And I just want to say, before I give you that example, is what we're trying to do with healing-centered engagement is democratize mental health. We're trying to open up the availability. We're not going to create enough therapists. We're not going to therapy our way out of this particular crisis. So what that means is that we have to train young people to be peer ambassadors around healing-centered engagement. We have to train parents, and that we have to train teachers. So in Philadelphia, we trained 150 teachers in healing-centered practices. And in those schools where those 150 teachers are, they selected a group of students that were also had high exposure to trauma, and they came to a healing-centered engagement summer camp. We call it Camp Akili. It was 4 days, or I think it was a 4-day pilot. But in that camp, young people created relationships. They talked about their emotions. They learned how to take what's in here and to get it out, and they played. They experienced joy. They built friendships. And then they built not just friendships with each other, but with those teachers and those other adults that surround them. We'll be working with other agencies in Philadelphia, but it's really trying to invest in that ecosystem. I hope that gives you some picture of what what healing-centered engagement looks like. It is an alternative. It is not treatment or healing-centered approaches. It's both, right? But healing-centered is the asset-based approach where everyone in that ecosystem has a part to play in the well-being of a community, in a school.
When you mention the joy, I should also point out that in our statewide project, we bring in a lot of the arts. Arts integration is connected in many of our schools with the healing-centered engagement principles, and it blossoms in those spaces.
Yeah, absolutely.
It brings not only the joy, but it creates in children creativity that they never knew they had.
Yeah.
And it just supports the work of healing-centered engagement.
Yeah, and there's so many different ways, right? The arts are a perfect avenue, it's a perfect vehicle to engage in healing-centered practices. Another example, the County of Los Angeles, arts and culture, their entire county, all of their arts educators went through our training, and we worked with them for 2 years, and they took healing-centered engagement practices and drove it into their arts programs. And so now they're using arts to talk about emotions. They're using arts to talk about dreaming and joy. They're using the karma principles to develop arts-based curriculum, because we know from research and from practice that when we use these different modalities, it really creates a broader opportunity for young people to have access to behavioral and mental health. Yeah.
And that's the other thing that we say all the time. We train educators and community partners not to be therapists,
Right.
just to be better understanding of perhaps what a child has been through.
That's right.
To get to the point where we are today. So if the child is acting out in class or speaking inappropriately, we look at why that's happening.
That's right.
Very differently compared to what we did before.
That's right.
And perhaps it will require the services of mental health professionals,
That's right.
or at least the guidance counselor in the school. And so because of that, we have worked with certain schools in engaging with mental health partners in the community.
Yeah.
So that we have a pipeline.
Yeah.
But on the other hand, we don't necessarily send everybody there anymore. Where we used to have done that.
It's a mental health problem. Go get your therapy.
Go talk to the SAC. Go talk to the counselor. We in our classrooms, we're doing a lot. We're looking at kids very differently.
Yeah, I mean, I always say, if you take your child to the doctor, like a physician, and your child throws up on that doctor because they're sick, they got something, they ate something, the doctor won't discipline that child. But in schools, that's kind of the only tool that we have to respond to what is essentially social emotional throw up, right? Is that students are exposed to something in the community, at home, they come to school, they act out, but the tool that we have in schools is discipline or classroom management. Now, I'm not saying that we shouldn't have it. Positive behavioral, PBIS is an important intervention that actually responds to that. But it allows for those teachers to step back and have a broader understanding about what's happening in the community and the ecosystem, as opposed to there's something wrong with this child, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And when you're talking about checking in, it was so interesting because I said we started this project the very end of March 2020. And we put together this amazing development team of educators and mental health professionals on Zoom.
Oh, wow.
We didn't meet until like 6 months ago.
Oh, wow.
But every single check-in was what's new, what's happening in your lives.
That's right.
I mean, we spent probably a half hour
That's right.
every meeting.
That's right.
Getting to know ourselves and to be able to trust ourselves to do this work. And we weren't able to see each other face to face because of the pandemic. And,
that is so powerful.
And it was interesting. One of our coaches said to you today, he wasn't sure how tall you were. that was the first thing that we all said to each other. Oh, I thought you were taller. I thought you were shorter.
Right, because everybody was in a little box, huh?
Exactly. But nevertheless, these check-ins were very important. We do it now, even if we get together
That's right.
in person, because it's so critical.
Yeah.
One of our schools is an alternate high school, and in an urban center. And what they've incorporated as a result of this, among other things, is at the start of every class, they have a mindfulness experience.
Mm-hmm.
And at the end of every class, they have a similar experience.
That's right. Mm.
So that when the students are walking in the halls, there's a sense of calm that they
That's
may
right.
not have observed prior to doing that simple
That's right.
tactic.
Transition in and transition out, right? That time, and it's so powerful to hear you talk about the fact that you do check-ins, because we think that when you form a group or a committee or some group, that is sufficient to get the job done. That my knowledge and the seat that I'm in is sufficient to actually get a tactical or strategic thing done. But the issues are not always tactical and strategic. They're emotional, they're social, and they're spiritual. And so that takes a different type of group. And those check-ins and to be able to show up with your full self creates something different. And I'm so glad to hear that group is still, you met on Zoom and now it's still together and you're still actually moving that agenda forward.
And as a result, many of that group have become our trainers because they have bought in so critically to the work that they want to be sure that it's spread.
Yeah.
And similarly, we do work with our coaches in that regard as well.
Yeah, it's important.
So we not only train the coaches, we keep training the coaches. We keep having conversations. We get together and talk about strategies that we've seen that work in other schools. And we have, a listserv where we share everything. One of the things that you touched upon in your examples is the idea of community forum, and we've done that in several of our schools as well. Had an HCE community forum.
Wow. Yeah.
And they've been highly successful.
Yeah. When you engage the community, engage young people, engage parents, community partners, it doesn't have to just sit with schools. Schools are the hub, right? But by bringing folks in, all focus, because the thing is I think now more than ever, particularly after the pandemic, folks it's not just a theoretical concept of behavioral and mental health. It's not just theory, because people see it with their kids, they see it with themselves, they see their own stress that they're holding. Teachers, we see the teaching workforce is, it's harder to recruit teachers. And it's all around behavioral and mental health. And so I think having those forums and spaces for people to pause and to breathe and to begin to use those karma principles on a daily basis really becomes attractive and useful for people's overall well-being. Yeah.
When you talked about principals looking for teachers, I was speaking with one of our trusted messengers in a high school in Newark. And they have incorporated healing-centered engagement concepts within their interviewing process. And they want to be clear to candidates that this is what this school looks like and what this school supports. And this is the mindset shift that has occurred.
Wow.
And we will help you get there, but we want to be sure that you're interested in that journey.
Yes. Yeah, we don't want to drag you, right?
Right. And so if you want to be dragged, go find a job someplace else, But I think that's really important that, as I said, the manifestations of this work have come out so differently depending upon the particular schools in which we've worked.
Yeah.
I mean, right now I think we've trained more than 4,000 people in the work.
Oh, wow.
So it's really, it's pervasive, and we just want to keep going and continue.
Well, we're going to help you get there. We're going to help. New Jersey will be one of our, actually Illinois has claimed itself as the first healing-centered state, but we got to see what they do. You guys are already our healing-centered state, but we're going to name it a healing-centered state as well.
Sounds good to me.
Yeah.
Thanks very much.